Okay, good evening, everyone. We do have a quorum right now, and it is 6 o'clock, so why don't we get started? I appreciate everyone's flexibility in meeting everyone today, and meeting this evening. So I'd like to call the meeting to order, and can we have a motion to adopt remote participation?
So moved.
Seconded, please.
Thank you. Let's move to our roll call alphabetically by town. Pam Nurse Acton, yes.
Michael Ruderman, Arlington, yes.
Who's next?
I think Steve.
Okay, Steve will do Concord, yes.
Ford Spalding, Dover, yes.
I think Judy, you're next.
Okay, Judy Crocker, Lexington, yes.
Jeff Stulen Needham, yes.
Alice DeLucas Joe, yes.
Okay, welcome everyone. And again, I thank you for your ability in scheduling today's meeting. Ed, do you want to introduce your team to everyone?
Sure. We have on the meeting Amy Perot, the assistant superintendent, Anthony Chiarello, the assistant principal of admissions, Brian Tilsley, assistant principal, Dan O'Brien, communications director, Jean DiPaolo, assistant director of CTE, John Camerata, our data and accountability coordinator, Katie Bouchard, CTE director, Nancy Houle, director of MTI, Bob Girardi, director of finance, Rich Eikinen, director of facilities, Sarah Baldick, our school nurse, and I also want to introduce Diane Dempsey and Sheila Nagel from the Minuteman Faculty Association, who we worked closely with over the last several months. And I see other staff and families out there as well.
Okay, thank you all. We really appreciate you joining us this evening. We have one main agenda item, which is the fall reopening discussion. So Ed, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Pam. I'm just going to go through a brief high altitude view PowerPoint, and then we'll get into a discussion. As you may know, today the commissioner extended the deadline for submitting the final plans to the 14th of August. We had already asked for an extension to the 13th, and I guess he got a lot of requests, so he extended that. So this has been to say it's a moving target is kind of an understatement. But the plan that we have, the draft plan that I sent out to you, is as of today. And we know it may change by the time school, it may change by next week, who knows? But by the time school opens, things may change again. But let me just share my screen. Here it is. Okay. There we go. If you can see that, just give me a thumbs up. Okay. So this has been the result of a lot of work by a lot of folks, and I just got to appreciate everyone. And I had my executive team attend tonight so that if there are any detailed questions that I'm not able to answer, or you want a little bit more background, they're here to answer them. I had a video here which I sent you the link to, but when I tested it out, there was trouble listening to it. I don't know if you can hear it or not. No?
No, I think you need to share your sound for us to hear it.
Yeah.
Because when I played it, Ed, I could hear it, but still I can't hear this.
Okay.
It's okay. I wasn't impressed.
Can we save comments until? So that video, which I sent a link to the school committee to, and we'll post it on the website, is really about the doctors in Massachusetts talking about the risk factors involved, and it's about a week or two old. But this slide here is from Johns Hopkins University, and if you look at this is positivity rates, transition positivity rates over the last 7 days. And you can see all of the New England states are down here in the green, which means they're less than 5%. So we've been trending in the right direction. That's going to change. It may change. Certainly everything changes, but Massachusetts and our other bordering states are in really good shape compared to some of the other states. So health and safety has been number one in our minds. It's the number one priority. We are prepared to switch to an all remote learning if the governor says so, or if we have higher than expected symptoms, which I'll talk about in a moment. We're adhering to all the state guidelines. We've posted them on our website. We've had a lot of questions about them, and we've tried to answer those questions as we go along. But just some general things in this plan. Everyone in the building is going to be required to wear a mask. We've established a second health office for possible COVID symptoms. That's going to be located in what is currently the special ed conference area right across from the nurse's office. We have 2 to 3 full-time nurses. One of our nurses is going to be going on maternity leave later in the fall. So we meet all the recommendations there. We've established an internal tracking system, which Sarah can talk about a little bit later. We're establishing a school-specific metric. Now, this is something that may change, but Sarah, the school nurse, and I met with our doctor, the school physician, and talked about this idea, where if 4% of the students that are in the building are presenting COVID symptoms, that will trigger a consideration to close school for the remainder of that week. That's talked about in a little bit more detail in the draft plan. Visitors, only invited visitors are going to be allowed in the building unless there's an extenuating circumstance. But they have a form they have to fill out. Security is being trained. Hunter Security Systems is our vendor for that. Facilities and operations, the entire facility is cleaned deeply each day. And during the day, points of high contact are disinfected. Anywhere there's a potential of someone who's been exposed or we believe there was an infected person, that area would be cleaned and isolated for at least 12 hours. We've purchased protective equipment, very selected plexiglass in certain areas, and of course signage. We've reorganized all the furniture to maintain the 3 to 6 foot distance. In most cases, it's a 6 foot distance. You may have read that the recommendations for the fall are that you could be within 3 feet, with a mask on. We've installed more hand sanitizing stations. We're in the process of marking pedestrian traffic on the floors so people are going in the same direction. In our preliminary model, which we talked about and we've sent some communications out, the Department of Ed required that we submit 3 opening model, 1 full in-person model, a hybrid mix, which is what we're recommending, and then a full remote model. The full in-person model is very difficult and expensive to implement. It's something we're not able to really recommend at this point in time. And mainly the school, as you know, was designed for 628. We have 650 students confirmed coming this fall. When we looked at all the costs associated with the full in-person modeling, it was nearly $1 million, including buses and some retrofits, additional staffing. And even with all that, physical distancing would be very difficult to maintain. The hybrid model, which we're talking about now, which has been revised, is that only one grade of students would be in the building at any one time. You may recall I've been talking a lot about a half-day, everyday model, but as we got into the, I should say, as the principal and Diane got into the scheduling details, we found that that half-day, everyday model was very difficult to implement without having to really gut some of the higher, I won't say higher level, but some of the rigorous academics that we pride ourselves on. So they presented this different model to me, and I saw the wisdom in it. One class will be in, and they'll be in CTE for most of that day, while the remainder of the students would be doing remote learning. This actually gives them more time in the shop than the half day every day if you look at it on a monthly basis. And it also allows us to deliver the special needs services that we're required to every kid who may need it. It really, as we're reflecting on it and looking at the details, it's really the best model to ensure rigorous instruction and maintain a greater level of safety in regards to fewer kids in the building. The full remote model, we're leveraging our one-to-one program, which we've had for 5 years now, where every student has their own laptop. A lot of folks believe that at some point we will have to go to a full remote model. And we have, in our parent survey, we had about 5% of parents said that they would prefer a remote model no matter what our hybrid was. So we're going to be accommodating those students as well. We had about 480 responses to the survey. 93% of the families favored a hybrid model. As I just mentioned, 5% were going to be remote at the time they filled out that survey, and the parents that I spoke with, said, my ideas about sending my child to Minuteman may change, as the data changes and as we learn more. The full in-person model was less than 80% of the parents felt that that was appropriate. We also asked them about transportation, and 75% indicated that they would use the school bus versus their child driving, or versus they or another person driving their student to school. We've worked well with our new bus contractor. They've identified that the maximum enrollment per bus would be about 25, 1 student per seat. They would be assigned seating. Masks are required. The windows are open. There's cleaning in between trips. So after the morning run, the buses are cleaned. And I should say, I don't know if it's the bus drivers themselves go through a daily check-in for themselves. And more of this is in more detail in the document that we sent out earlier, but that's the brief overview of the fall closing plan. And Madam Chair, you can moderate questions from the school committee.
Okay, let's open it up to questions. I will write down hands as I see them. Right now I have Jennifer, Jeff, then Steve.
Okay, just a quick question. I'm sorry I was late. I lost track of time. You mentioned what the parent survey said. What did the teacher survey say?
The teacher survey, I think we had 81 or 82 teachers respond to the survey. there were less than 10% of the teachers felt that they would not be comfortable coming back to school. What we'll be doing next is reaching out to those individuals and working with them around what is appropriate for them.
Okay, so we go on to Jeff.
Am I unmuted? I'm
Yes.
unmuted, good. So I did read through the plan, and we did talk to this before, and I'm dealing with the certain things at Newton South. So first, a few things that I'm really, really happy about. I'm really happy that you have a published metric, even though it may change, as to when you will switch to full remote learning. I am more than delighted with your idea that the important reason for students to attend the school is for their CTE education, and the academic stuff can be done online. That allows you to have only 25% of the kids in the school, which increases the probability that you will not have to shut down, and allows them to focus on the part that really needs to be done in the school. So I'm absolutely delighted that you've changed to that plan. Could not be happier about that. That eliminates like 10 issues I had are now completely gone because of that. The other thing that I'm very happy with is that I noticed in there that you've resourced up by giving all the students access to Adobe Creative Cloud. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if they understand how much they should appreciate that expense that you've gone on their behalf. That is quite an incredible piece of technology to make available to all of your high school students. And I think that it's a fabulous idea. So I'm delighted by that. My primary question was about your options for the teachers who need to not come into school because of medical or age-related issues, but you say you're working with them, so I'll let that go for now. So my only real two questions I have at this point, which I don't expect an answer to today necessarily, is I've looked at all the details of your plan, and there's a lot of stuff that you're going to do that's extra, okay? A lot of stuff that is needed that is extra. So the first question is, can you really do all that? Not just on paper, but in reality. And the second question to go with that is, what do you need from us to make it so that you can really do all the stuff that you say in here, not just on paper, but in reality? What is it that we can do to make those aspects of the plan that seem to require a huge amount of extra work more feasible? So those are really my only questions at this time. Otherwise is just happiness. And as a teacher, I've been thinking about myself. I've been thinking about this for a long time and dealing with it from a teacher's point of view at Newton. So I'm really happy with what you've done here.
Well, the answer to your question is yes, we can do all those things, and we've actually started doing them. We're looking forward to getting more feedback on how we're rolling out some of this stuff. And also with the 10 days of training and professional development that's been determined by the Department of Ed, we'll have an opportunity to kind of test some of these concepts and plans and refine them before the kids come in. I think, what the school committee can do is kind of what you've been doing. You've given me some good advice. You've listened. We did post for a new special ed position today. We may have to add some staff here and there to fill in gaps that we find, or if there's a particular content area that we cannot deliver in the way that we expect to, we may need some support in the classroom. A lot of the special ed supports are going to be difficult to deliver, and there may be some additional expenditures there. But from what we're all in the budget has been passed so far. We're also accessing different funds that have been made available through the state and through the federal government, and there's an expectation that more funds will be coming. So I think kind of getting familiar with the plan is important, so that when folks ask you questions, you can refer them to the plan or answer them easily. but I appreciate that.
Okay, we have Steve and Alice. Before going on to Steve, I just want to say I did notice some folks who are not school committee members raising their hand to speak. I'd like to encourage you, if you're not on the school committee, to put your question in the chat, and the superintendent will then be able to get to that. So Steve, you are next.
Okay, I agree with a lot of what Jeff said. I really do like the hybrid approach. My question really relates to the parent survey. I think it said that 75% of the students would be taking the transportation. My question is, how's that compared to a normal year? What's the percentage of kids that take a bus in a normal school year?
Brian can answer that. Brian Tilsley, the assistant principal.
Hey, how you doing? This is Brian. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
So currently we're tracking in district right now, and I have in front of me, out of the 485, we have 85 students, actually 87 as of today, that have declined transportation, which means they're either getting a ride from a parent, or they're driving themselves with a license and parking, or carpooling. From previous years, to put it in perspective, last year we had 56. So it's up tremendously this year in comparison to last. So it's gone from 56 to 85. And again, that's only with 485 responding. We're expecting at least 100 more responses. So that's 85 in district students that have declined based on, again, parent rides or driving themselves this year. And most of them, just so you know, Lexington, Arlington, and Acton, being the closest, are the main towns that have declined ridership with rides or using their license.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Alice.
Hi, I'm also happy to see that the shops are where the kids will be coming in, because obviously that's an area that's hard to teach online. I want to know a couple of things. For the shop, is that going to be a group of kids with one teacher? And I apologize, I haven't had time to read the document. I read about the third of it before the meeting started. Is that the group of teachers, the teacher and the group of kids staying together, eating together, not wandering around the school, not socializing outside of that classroom? Are they?
That's my understanding. George, well, he's called Michelle right now. Diane or Michelle might be able to answer. But that's the case. They're going to stay together for the most part, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the
That is definitely the design, is that they would stay, pretty much in their shop with their teacher. That, the only time they'd really be leaving is if they're going to the bathroom. Lunch, obviously, but even that, we're going to cohort them. So they're always with that same, group of kids, in the area going to lunch. And even at 25%, that makes lunch a lot more manageable now. We can have several lunches. We can keep them in the appropriately social distance in the cafeteria or in the student union where we want them to eat. So that's going to work out really, really well. So yes, that is the intention.
So sorry to keep going, but I'm going to anyway. So how many kids are they going to come into contact with and other people when they're they're coming to school, they're in their shop, they're with their teacher, they're using presumably one restroom, not a bunch of different restrooms? How many people are they coming into contact with?
Well, it would vary by shop. It could be as few as 2 or 3 other kids. Or in the case of, I think it's plumbing, which has 2 teachers, there's 16 or 17 in the highest class, but they would be, in a shop that's over 3,000 square feet and apart from each other. Each teacher would take a smaller group in that case. But to answer your question, that if you look at the individual grade, it's be less than 20.
They would come into contact with less than 20, fewer than 20 people.
Yeah.
So they're not moving around and hanging out.
No.
So where does the 4% come from? How is
Well-
that 4% of the student? Like say you've got a class, you got a bunch of kids and teachers in the school. How do you come to 4%? If 4% is triggered, that's when you decide that it's too much. How did you come to that number?
Through a conversation Sarah and I had with our school physician. Sarah, if you're on, you can add to this, but we don't have any testing. So the only thing we can go by is symptoms. And we kind of reviewed the symptoms with the doctor. He asked some other questions about social distancing and masks. And Sarah had some data from last year and the number of visits. And we shared those with the doctor. And it's a metric that we used our best judgment on based upon the science and our past history. And Sarah's unmuted, you can say.
Yeah, we just to reiterate what Dr. B said, we just looked at, the number of visits we had in past years versus how many kids we would have seen with coronavirus symptoms if this was going on in past years, and just kind of with Dr. Indonian discussed kind of a threshold where he felt was appropriate for us to have some level of concern.
Okay, so if there's 200 kids and teachers in the building at any given time, is that about the right number?
Roughly.
So you wouldn't take action until 8 people were showing symptoms? I'm very worried about those people, if they're showing symptoms, have been sick for days. So it makes me somewhat concerned.
No, I understand the concern. I mean, we have an RN that's coming on board, Sarah, and another part-time nurse. And we've talked about the severity of the symptoms. And, people who show symptoms are going to be sent home immediately. So it's not like we're keeping them around until they hit a certain critical mass. When they demonstrate symptoms, and if once Sarah interviews them and they've had any other contact with someone, they're immediately sent home and they have to get a test, I think, within 72 hours, or quarantine at home for 14 days. But in this model, if we close school on a Tuesday, all those kids will have been quarantined for almost 20 days before they come back again. So I don't know if that answers your concern, but
I still wonder about the 4%. I think it's worth revisiting that figure. I like what you're doing. I like the direction you're going in. Everybody knows that my daughter's an ER doctor and was in New York City for the height of the coronavirus epidemic. So I have a different perspective on this than everyone else. I would like you to revisit the 4% and get some more input on that number to see if that's the right number. I also, I wonder about the, how much education we can do with people to explain to them how important it is for them outside of school to be behaving in a certain way. Because people outside of school may not take care of themselves as well as you are taking care of them in the school. I can see that the amount of caring and concern that has been put into this plan. I understand that. I worry because I've seen out and about, I've seen other types of behavior that people are engaged in that are not what you're prescribing for the students and the staff in the school. And I worry about them. People on the weekend, people traveling, people's families traveling and coming back. We have no control over that. And so I'm concerned about that too, I mean, if it were a perfect world and everybody scurried home and, and washed their hands and behaved properly, then, you could imagine having a pretty safe environment, but you could also imagine someone going to various parties and things like that that high school students might do. You know, I don't know. I'm very nervous about it. Anyway, if you can look at that 4% with maybe some more input from other parties, it would make me more comfortable. I think 8 people is a lot of people when they've already been sick. That's like 6, the transmission rate and everything, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, we're continuing to get input.
Okay, thank you. I have in this order Judy, Jeff, and Ford, but before I turn over to Judy, I just have a clarification question on that. Ed, is that metric that you're talking about, the 4%, part of the plan that you're submitting to DESE, or is it outside of that?
We're going to include it in what we submit to them, yes.
Okay.
The commissioner today was talking about testing being more available. They don't have any details for us, but if by the time school starts there's more testing available, then the symptomatic metric gets replaced with a testing metric, which is really the best metric to use.
Oh, okay. Let me turn it over to Judy. So remember, we got Judy, Jeff, and Ford. Anyone else, please? Yeah.
Thank you, Pam. Hi, Alice. I'm one of the new kids. Nice to meet you. I'd like to piggyback on what you were saying, Alice. So to the number of 4, from the 4%, because New York City schools have made their threshold 3%, and the governor and DESE haven't come out with anything yet. So would you consider in your back to return to school plan, maybe put in an asterisk next to that and saying, you know, because again, I agree, 4% is a little high, and until we have a national number or a statewide number, it just might be, and nothing against, you know, anyone with whom you conferred to develop that number. It's just that I think everyone's waiting for somebody else to do part of this work, and
Oh yeah,
we're all playing catch up here. Could I ask on the survey, and really kudos for having such a large percentage of the parents participate in the survey. Did they have any, have you received a lot of public comment about anything?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, in the survey there was you know, open-ended boxes, and I think that there were, I'm not looking at it in front of me, but there was probably 100 comments if you added up all the open response questions in there. And there was, we're glad to share that with you too and send you the link so you can see what they were.
No, just wondering if, you know, people had.
Oh yeah, and I've gotten individual emails, and one of the communications we put out, they just click and send me an email. I've had at least a dozen of those families reach out just in the last week with more specific questions about their individual child. Can I ask you one thing, Judy? Was that 3% in New York, was that a transmission rate or an infection rate or a symptoms?
To be quite honest, I don't remember. The information coming out of everywhere was so fast and furious.
Yeah.
I can tell you what it was. I just remember New York City set this, I think they said it last week. Because similar to Alice, I have one of my kids in the city who's been there since day one. So it just caught my eye. So I can find out for you, but I don't know myself. So thank you for that. Well, and I appreciate my colleagues. You've answered a lot of the questions that I've already had. But I just really wanted to say thank you. There's so many unknowns with this. It's the complexity. It's been a burden on everyone's mental health, the stress level, just a lot of patience, and really appreciate the collaborative approach, understanding that everything is fluid and we still have, you know, a lot way to go, a lot more to learn. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Before turning it over to Jeff, I just want to ask a follow-up question to Judy's last question. And I very much appreciate your efforts to get parent input, and I wanted to just ask if you can describe kind of plans to make sure that you're continuing to get that as we go forward. You know, are you going to be doing more surveys, you know, town meetings? You know, do you have plans for how to be getting that input on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, all of the above. There's a little section at the end about communication in the plan. We haven't set any dates for any of that activity yet. But now that, as of, you know, a few hours ago, we have a little bit more time to submit. So I'm thinking about trying to have some sort of a town hall meeting with families. Maybe not using Zoom, but there's another YouTube thing where people can put questions in the chat and you kind of go through them that way in a more orderly fashion. But so yeah, we're considering all that. I think we've sent out over 20 communications over the last 12 weeks. You know, we're going to continue to do that. A lot of folks have my email now, apparently, which is fine. Our website, if you've seen the COVID area there, is updated daily. Also, we have a new design for the website, which I think is cleaner and nicer.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to Jeff.
Just to, not to respond, but just to comment on some of Alice's concerns, which are fully legitimate. The thing is that we cannot change other people's behavior, no matter how outrageous it is, no matter how responsible it is, no matter how many times we tell them about that. So if you're going to open it all, you're going to have to take a certain amount of risk, and that's just the way that it is. People are not are behaving well. In our case, if this was like Newton South, I'd say I'd be much more willing to say, let's just do fully remote, since it's primarily academics, not 100%, but primarily. But for our school, the disadvantage for the kid is higher without that hands-on component. So I'd be more reluctant to take a higher level of risk at Minuteman than I would at Newton South. Also, the 25% makes me feel much better about the risk. As far as the 4% number you have there, the way I look at that, that is just a placeholder, basically to say there has to be a standard by which we know that we're going to close. We're putting a number in there right now, 4%, but the reality is that between now and opening day and even thereafter, as more information about the virus comes in, as more information about how it works in schools come in, that number is going to change rapidly. So the fact that it's 4% now, probably too high, maybe not, maybe yes. But I don't really care what number you put in there right now, because I know for a fact it's going to change. And between now and opening, and I'm just happy that there is the idea of having a publicly published standard, even if we know it's going to change, to let the public know that we're thinking about it, and to let them know, don't panic if we have one person with symptoms. Because if you say any person with symptoms, we close everything down, then you end up in a whiplash situation, and that's no good. So there has to be some level of risk and some standard. And the standard is just going to change as more information comes in. As long as you're looking at it, as long as you're thinking about it, and as long as people keep asking questions about it, then I'm happy.
I have to step away for just a sec. Amy's going to take over. Amy Peralt, just for a couple seconds.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Ford.
Thank you, everybody. How do we accommodate that student that needs extra help, extra attention, both in academics, but also CTE? Have we thought about accommodating them? Because if they're only in school every, 4 days, and you're also on Zoom, I have no doubt that some teachers reach out on their own to help a child, but how do we accommodate the child that needs extra help, the student that needs extra help? And some may need a lot of it.
Right. So that's a question I can actually answer, so that's good. So you've probably all heard the guidance, like we need to make sure that our high-risk students are, taken care of as much. I think in this model with only 25% of the students in the building at a time, that gives us an opportunity to be able to identify and, if needed, get more students that fit that high-risk category in the building in front of special educators or counselors or academic teachers as needed. So we'll, we hired an extra guidance counselor this year for the incoming year. So we have a pretty good amount of mental health professionals in the building, as well as, you heard Dr. B say, we're hiring another, which is wonderful, special education teacher. So I really feel that we have a good amount of staff now to really be able to assess our students and whatever their needs may be. And if we have to get them in the building more, or get them in front of people more for some of that more direct instruction, we have the capabilities to do that.
Thank you.
Could I ask a follow-up to that, Amy? So does that mean, because yes, the guidance has been for kind of high-need students to do as much in person as possible. So if you have someone identified as high needs, either because of what's on their IEP, or because they're falling behind, or they don't access remote education well, are you considering bringing those students in more often than maybe, just with their grade cohort?
It's on the table. It's definitely a possibility if we decide as a team or a group that that's what the student needs, and it's on the table.
Pam, may I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Sports. How are we handling the athletics? I understand some sports are supposedly going forward middle of September, and that's the MIA sports, but also we have non-MIA activity that goes on. How are we going to handle that, Brian? Probably Brian.
Brian.
Or
Yeah, right now, Ford, we're waiting on the MIA with anticipation for the 14th. I'm hearing, luckily I'm an official with wrestling, so I've been on some of the Zoom meetings, and I'm hearing through the grapevine that right now it's probably going to be golf at the most. There's a lot of the sports in the fall are, Governor Baker has them in what's called a high risk category, and those he refuses to move those out. So football's high risk, that will not be moved out. Soccer is moderate. So I really, right now, I really see golf as the only sport potentially having a chance. But again, we're waiting on the MIA right now. They sort of, unfortunately, in their last meeting we were all on, they sort of kicked the can up till September, and now a lot of coaches and ADs are kind of waiting on their response.
I think it was soccer and field hockey that they were talking about the 14th to start practices for 2 weeks and then have a shortened season. But
yeah,
it's the physical education component that goes on in the school. Is that going to go on?
I think George can touch. George, did you guys have I know George had mentioned some phys ed through Mr. Donato.
Yeah, phys ed will happen virtually, because that's considered part of the academics. So, which it would have felt, all summer long as we've gone through all sorts of permutations of the model, that's always been how we were going to do PE anyway. So that's how they're going to get interaction with Mr. Donato and Mr. Plater. Or Ms.
Great.
Plater.
Thank you both.
Okay, we have Michael, then Alice,
And Jennifer.
then Jennifer. Go ahead, Michael.
Thanks, everybody. Good to see you all tonight. I know people have probably been working their butts off to get this plan put together, and it's 100 times easier to ask questions about what's not in there yet than what's in there. So please understand that I'm acknowledging all that. I think in our communications to parents and to the public, we should emphasize that we are leveraging one of Minuteman's unique characteristics here, in that we already have a program of splitting kids' days or splitting kids' instructional time between academics and their shop, or the CTE. And we are using that to our advantage here in crafting a program that shouldn't be as strange to them as it would be to kids who are accustomed to spending 5 days a week, all day, every day in the classroom. I think that's one of our big selling points. If we're not going to have sports at the beginning of the school year, let's put that into the communication. I don't like to have to read between lines, and like on page 26 of what we received this afternoon, if it says we're waiting for the MIAA to get back to us on that, that shouldn't be the first sentence of the paragraph. First sentence of the paragraph should be, there will be no sports at the beginning of the school year. Then we are waiting for future instructions. Let's just be upfront about everything we're doing. Likewise, with whatever the percentage of infection rate is that we're going to be using as our pull the plug number. I've already had people asking me, what is it and why is it? Whatever it is we pick, let's try to have as much footnoting and rationale behind it as we can. I've already had questions from families about that. Our best guess, or this is our feeling, or this is what we've talked to the doctor about, that may not be satisfactory. If there's anything else that we can offer as underpinning for that, I think you're hearing from us that we would like to have that. Do we have a plan for meeting the nutritional needs of any of our kids who are receiving assistance for their meal plan for the 75% of the kids that aren't going to be taking lunches at Minuteman each day?
I don't know if someone wants the meal plan. Well, being a regional school, we looked into the efficacy of trying to, in the spring when we closed, of trying to deliver meals. And what we did instead was we delivered our foodstuffs to certain places in certain towns, and they were distributed from there. And we encouraged our families to go to those places. And those places, I don't know off the top of my head where they were, how many there were. Someone else may know better than I. Amy's shaking her head yes.
It would be good if there's time. Like I said, I know people have been working their butts off. It would be good if we can get some follow-up on that. Were the families that needed food assistance availing themselves of what we were providing? Let's see. So I'm presuming that, again, had to read between the lines here. Kids who are attending classes remotely will start the day at the same time that the school day normally begins and end the day at the same time the day normally ends. Is that correct?
Generally, that's correct, yes. The commissioner is pretty clear that although the year has been shortened for students by 10 days, we still have to accommodate time and learning of 935 hours for the year. And it will be scheduled, it will be graded, attendance will be taken.
Okay, and what is the locus for the online education that the faculty is providing? Is that expected to be from a classroom at school, or do we expect that there'll be a mix here between teachers who will be teaching from school and teachers who will be teaching from home?
The majority, unless there's a documented medical reason where they can't come into school, it will all take place from Minuteman.
Okay. That's it for me. Thanks. There's a huge amount of work that I see that's already gone into this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask as a follow-up to Michael's question about the students accessing their education remote. So for those who do choose, or those families who do choose to be 100% remote and not to take part in any in-person education, how is that going to impact their technical classes?
It's going to impact it greatly. We're researching different online resources for CTE. And you know, there are some fairly robust resources available. We did a collaborative purchasing with Assabet on some, I would call it more exploratory type online curriculum. But it is going to be less than what they would have if they were in school with a licensed professional doing hands-on learning. The online component in some cases, for instance, like related academics, you know, if you have carpentry related academics, that's going to be taught by the carpentry teacher from Minuteman. And we've gotten some hybrid cameras where there's a wider view of the whole class and the student can be more participatory even though they're from home. We have to test those out and see how it works for us and make adjustments. And you know, but it's not going to be, we just can't do what we've normally done with those kids. It's a small percentage, and I'm hoping that that percentage shrinks the closer we get to the first day of school. But we're prepared for it.
Okay, thank you, Ed. I have now Alice, Jennifer, and Ford.
Well, as usual, I'm going to delve into the sort of philosophical a little bit and talk about acceptable risk. So to me, in any kid's lifetime, if they get delayed a little bit in learning, that is something they can recover from. They can make that up. And to me, it's an acceptable risk to say, gee, you know, it's going to take you an extra year. But I think because Minuteman obviously has spent so much effort on thinking about the kids and the safety of the kids and the staff and everyone associated with the school, the families of the kids and so on, I think we have to even go a little bit further to minimize risk to everyone involved. I want to see everyone who's on this call back here. And I'm really happy to hear that the phys ed is going to be virtual. I noticed in the MASC's draft policy about masks that came out today, they had exempted masks for phys ed. I was like, what? Like, why would you do that? You know, and then I heard George say that, you know, actually they're not going to be doing phys ed that way. I was so relieved. So to me, every time I hear some Minutemen make the right move, I'm relieved, and I want to just hear more and more of those right moves, because there's sort of, to me, not any acceptable risk of someone getting this illness just because of what it does to people. So let's really clamp it down even more.
Thank you, Alice. I have Jennifer, Ford, and then Jeff.
Okay, so I have a nitpicky question about the buses. So there's two problems. I mean, I guess in the draft policy, it says that if a kid doesn't have a mask when they arrive at school, one will be provided for them. Are they going to have them on the bus to hand out as they get on?
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
them with them?
Yep, we're going to have a supply
Okay.
for each driver, so they're not going to be able to board. And it's funny you bring this up, because we were just at a meeting recently, and at 44 years old, I had forgotten my mask. Within, you know, within a few hours, I had forgotten my mask 3 or 4 times, and I said, well, what are my 14, 15-year-old, 16-year-old kids going to do? You know, so yeah, we're going to supply that for each bus driver. They're going to have a box of masks, so if they forget and they're at the bus stop and they're panicking, we'll give them a mask before they get on the bus.
Okay. And logistically for the buses, is each week going to have a different bus route?
Yeah, so that's a
Based
great
on
question.
where the kids are, right?
Yeah, we're gonna try to form our bus route based on the hybrid model of the schedule. And the great thing about the new company we're working with is they have an online routing system, where the company we worked with before did not. So this online routing system is really unique, where if I can get them the results of the survey all the way down to who's riding in the morning and the afternoon, we can modify the routes differently for each set of kids that are coming into the building. That's the idea of it. Yep.
Okay. And then I had there was one more question about something, but I can't remember what it was. So as far as the masks are going, are people able to wear whatever kind of face covering they choose, or are we? And yes, well, yeah, you see a lot out there.
Well, it's interesting. I was in a meeting earlier, and Sarah actually shared with the group I was with earlier what the definition of a mask is by the CDC. And I think one of the key factors that I read in that, it has to be multiple layers. So you see a lot of kids, with this, with the neck thing, that's probably not acceptable if you go right by the CDC. Some kids wearing bandanas, which is a single. It's going to be a cloth mask, which needs to be washed, or a surgical mask, not necessarily an N95 mask. But yeah, there's going to have to be some education about what is a mask and what isn't. And if someone comes to school with a mask that isn't a mask, we'll give them a mask that is a mask.
Thank you. No, that was concerning me because you see all sorts of things out there, and as you said, some of them aren't as effective as others, and you want to have some continuity. Thank you.
Yep, good question. Thank you, Jennifer. Next we have Ford.
I think in my mind I've solved my question, but I'll ask it anyway. Freshman exploratory for CTE, how are we going to handle that?
Well, Katie, it's going to be better in this new model that I was going to say they convinced me of, but that they convinced me of. Go ahead, Katie. Katie's the director of CTE.
So currently, Ford, our plan is to get students through the exploratory process much faster than we have in years past. There's kind of two thoughts behind that. They'll be traveling around the building less because they'll be in their program, and also we'll have that cohort established. So, these are the plumbing kids, these are the early ed kids. So that's kind of the thought process behind that. We would have them explore all of the programs as usual to begin the exploratory, and then, limit them. In years past, we've done 9 different programs that they've chosen. We were hoping to do at maximum 5. We just have to look at the numbers. If we have 100 kids that want to re-explore culinary, we might have to offer more choices in order to get them all through the program safely. But that's our biggest thing. We want to get them in the programs as early as possible so they can start forming those relationships with their teachers. If we unfortunately have to go to a full remote model, they'll already be established in their program.
Thanks, Katie.
Okay, Jeff and then Judy.
So I want to go back to risk for another minute because there's another aspect of risk that we have not talked about. So in the courses I teach at Newton South, like honors level computer science, all the kids choose to be there, which is the best situation possible for a teacher, right? Everybody has chosen to be there. It's not a class where why do I have to? No, they all signed up and they chose to be there. And yet even in my classes, during remote teaching, I had some students who disappeared and did not participate. And those are often the students who are most at risk in terms of mental health issues and social emotional learning issues and physical health issues because of the mental health issues. So their disengagement is another risk for them. It's a mental health risk and a physical health risk in not being engaged. So yes, there is a risk of getting COVID. There are also other risks to the family, both mental and physical, when the student is disengaged from the school because they're not physically present. So even in my elective course that they choose to be in, I've had some students with serious mental health issues who disengaged, and it was a serious problem for the families because we were not present in the school. So getting COVID is not the only risk. There are other risks to the students. So the risk is greater than losing a year of schooling. And a lot of these kids in the CTE, if they're not going to participate, will lose a year of schooling. They may have to take the year over again. That's one risk. But the other risk is the mental health risk, and that's the one that I personally am more concerned about. And that's the argument for taking the risk of having people come into school is greater, has merit for me. Otherwise, I say just make it all remote.
Okay, Judy.
All right, as a follow-up, I just looked it up. So for New York City schools, it's a 3% infection rate.
Mhm.
And so again, that would include the entire school population being 3%. So, you know, if you're talking for the exploratory group doing the CTE, it would be everyone in the whole school, all 650 students, not just the 25% participating in the freshman class.
Okay. And we're talking about a symptomatic rate, not an infection rate, because the infection rate is based upon a test. So it's a little bit different. Can I go through some of the questions on the chat, Pam, or is there someone else in line? Jennifer.
One quick question. I remember what I wanted to ask. So the parents who choose to do complete remote learning, if things go well, are they going to be able to opt back into at any point? Or
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep, important question. Yes, go ahead, Ed.
So I'm just reading, there's a concern just about what Jennifer said, families who are not sending their kids. And they'll have missed out on hands-on from the whole year. What does that look like for them? So the question is really like, if some kids aren't in the school all year and they don't have any hands-on opportunities, what's it going to look like for them? Well, that's a pretty tough question. There's a couple things that we're doing in terms of we didn't mention it yet, and Katie can fill anybody in that has any questions, but we're going to have summer school for academic recovery. We're also going to be having some weekend types of activities for CTE and academics, and we're planning for a February additional time that we got funded in all three models of our additional instruction time. So if, you know, depending how many kids there are and who they are, if it's a couple of kids from one shop and the parents are comfortable with it, we might, you know, ask teachers, and we would pay them obviously to work with that small group of kids, maybe after school when no one else is in the building or on a weekend. My sense is it's not going to be a very large group. I think we answered that. Site. One question was, is there a positive test rate as put out by the state, at which point we will decide to start fully remotely? There is not right now, but the commissioner and his team have been trying to identify a rate, a triggering metric. It might be transmission rate, it might be infection rate. They expect to have some sort of a metric identified prior to the start of school. We heard that this past Monday, I believe. Somebody said DESE's website is down, which is why our links weren't working in our document, I guess. Actually, that's all the questions I have in the chat. And I encourage, if anyone has any more, put them in the chat.
I have two questions, Ed. Everything we read encourages the use of outdoor space. Are you doing anything different to kind of enhance the use of outdoor space?
Well, we have our courtyard, and obviously some of the shops all have direct access to the outside. So as it's always been, there'll be some things happening outside when the weather is good. But, you know, at only 25% occupancy rate, we've got a lot of good space inside the building.
Yeah. Okay, and my other question, has to do with supporting parents with remote education. And one of the things that we found, and by we, I mean the global we, not the Minuteman we, this spring was, it was really difficult for many, many parents to do what they needed to support their kids in the remote education, and that they needed training and support. And I'm just curious whether you've thought about remote learning from that standpoint, like what kind of supports the family needs.
Oh, yeah, and Victor, our IT director, is on the call. He might be able to add to whatever I say, but one of the great things that he did, Victor, is he organized some kids into the Geek Squad, and they sort of are manning the helpline. There's Victor there. And we're providing help to families. We also, in one of our surveys we did, we made sure that everybody had internet connection. Victor worked with Verizon to fill any gaps that might have come to our attention. And we're continuing that. We're adding a little bit more capacity to IT in regards to personnel. And if Victor wants to add anything about how the geek kids are going to operate as we enter school, feel free. I don't know if any of you have met Victor.
Hi.
Say hi, Victor. Come on.
Greetings, greetings. I hope
Oh,
all
there
of
you are.
and your families are well during these unprecedented times. No, this is what Dr. McQuillan had said. In response to COVID-19, we actually reinvented ourselves as a hands-on service desk called the Geek Out. So for our students and families who are having issues with technology while remote, we actually have a support line. So they can call us between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. and we'll square away their issues. So while we were remote, we had a number of students and families come on site, and we did address their technology concerns. We are a Microsoft 365 district, so we do use Teams, OneNote, etc. So for families who need help with learning those technologies, we provide that training. So we will be available for that. So if you have any concerns, you can feel free to contact me, and we could detail our support strategy.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Thanks, Victor.
Yeah, I think there's a couple more questions in the chat, Ed.
Okay. Here we go. Question is, if we hit 4%, do we go fully remote for 2 weeks and then come back? Not necessarily. If you think about it, if we have the freshmen in and there's a 3 or 4% symptom rate, we would close school for that week. Those students wouldn't be back in the building for 3 more weeks, so they would have gone through the mandatory quarantine time. It would also have given them an opportunity to get a test and get the results back. And I believe there's protocols that have been published that, the student couldn't come back until there was a negative test or the 14-day quarantine had happened. How are electives being scheduled if all academics are remote? George or Diane, you want to answer that question? Electives?
Pretty much the same as always. It's already been scheduled. Just like if we were planning to come back in the fall, full, normal, typical schedule, that's exactly how it was scheduled.
So
go ahead.
So that electives are being conducted remotely from the school.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I saw Alice, then Jennifer.
Hi. What's the largest group of people that's in like a shop? Kids, teachers, everybody. What's the largest number of people in one of those groups?
I think 17, which was I think it's the sophomore class in plumbing or electrical.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Jennifer?
So on the scenario that 4% or 3%, whatever the number ends up being, of the freshman class have symptoms, what do you do with the teachers? They have to quarantine for 2 weeks too, don't they?
If they're showing symptoms, they would go home.
Right, but I mean, if you get to the rate where you're, say, 3 or 4%, you would send the freshmen home, and then they wouldn't be back in school for another 3 weeks, so they'd be during that period. But the teachers would have to be back because they'd have the next group of kids.
Right.
So how are you going to handle that?
Well,
As long as they're not showing symptoms?
correct.
It looks like Sarah wants to answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
So in order for the teachers to have to quarantine or anyone else, you'd have to be considered a close contact, which would be someone that was within the 6 feet of another person who is symptomatic or positive for more than 10 to 15 minutes. So with the way that we have the masking and the 6 feet of social distancing, we're planning on that helping to eliminate or greatly reduce the amount of close contacts we would have as a result of any students having symptoms.
Right, and just, scenarios, if there were 10 kids that were symptomatic and we closed school and 8 of them came back as positive, then we would have a whole different scenario to look at and what to do. We'd have to see who they were in contact with. We have to report those kinds of things. So a whole nother series of procedures gets invoked if positive infection rates come back from those kids that we have asked to go home because they were symptomatic. We would have to do more analysis of who they were in contact with and that sort of thing. And the state would help us do that. We don't have to do that. We're not in charge of doing contact tracing. The state is. Go ahead.
Okay, no, I saw another question, so if you wanted to finish that one. Okay, let's move on to Judy.
Okay, to follow up on this line of questioning, so the wild card out there is really the rate of when you're tested, it's getting your results back in a timely fashion. Because right now it's
huge issue.
paying for rapid tests. It's taking anywhere from 3 to 7 days. So
huge issue. Sarah and I have been talking, and I also reached out to the Health Trust. We're with 5 other schools, and if we could have any access through a local partnership with either Emerson Hospital or Leahy in Burlington. There's actually a COVID testing site in Lexington near the Walgreens there. That Minute Clinic there does testing in there. So we're looking at how do we get our staff access if there isn't any from the state in a timely fashion.
Okay, Jeff?
It took me 9 days to get results back from the Minute Clinic. That was not useful. I think what you should do is you just start a new shop, a viral testing shop, and just ramp it up real fast.
We'll apply for some grants.
Are there any other questions, either from school committee members or in the chat? Alice?
I don't see any more in the chat.
Okay.
Student engagement in the process of making the plan. Can you describe that?
In which plan? The schedule or the
plan for them to be? I feel like they need to have some agency in making, a commitment to staying in the shop with their shop friends and not going out and being social with all the other kids that they really want to see, in order for you to keep the cohort thing that you're talking about to working. You got to keep, the kids have to agree to that. So I want to understand how, if there's been, how that conversation has gone, I guess.
Well, we haven't surveyed students at this point in time. Anthony has spoken with a lot of students and families of the incoming freshmen. I don't know if he can add anything to that. I've heard from some kids, very basic questions, when are we going back? Is my shop still running? that sort of stuff. Anthony's been out to visit almost all the incoming freshmen to give them their swag bag. I see Anthony's unmuted. Is there anything you want to add to that about how kids might be responding to the plan?
Yeah, I mean, both the kids and their families, they just want to be here. And that's from, you know, I met with a family in Needham who the mom was like, I don't want to say she was trying to lead the son to be like, maybe you should just go to Needham High School this year, but he has consistently told her, I'm still going to Minuteman. This is what I want to do. You know, I'm up in Stowe and Lancaster, and, you know, those kids are, you know, they put a lot of time just to get to school and they still want to come. And they want to be in the building for whatever we can do. And I think the parents have been understanding that it won't be exactly how they would want it in terms of like long term. But, you know, I haven't heard anything negative or them not wanting to come. Just all, they've appreciated all the communication thus far, and feeling like, you know, different towns don't feel like they've been particularly communicated with by their home district. And that obviously varies as we have, you know, a number of towns, but, you know, I think they've been satisfied with what we've been telling them. So yeah, I haven't heard anything bad, just, you know, kids ready to go, and parents, you know, just waiting for more information.
Thank you. And there is a question in the chat. What are the options for teachers that don't feel safe returning and they don't have documented medical issues?
Well, that would be a conversation between HR, myself, and that teacher. We've been through a lot of webinars and seminars about what options teachers have. We want to make sure that they know what those options are. And there'll be more information coming about that.
Okay. Excuse me, any more questions from the school committee? Anyone that I missed? Okay, I want to thank everyone in the Minuteman community, you know, Ed, the administration, the faculty, the parents, school committee members, everyone who's been working so hard to to do everything possible to make this a good experience for the students. You know, we really appreciate everything that you've been doing.
Well, the executive team, the teachers involved, and it's just been, I don't know, it's a great example of how people can work together to find a solution to a very difficult problem. If they're willing to have the hard conversations, willing to be open, as I was reminded of today, to be open to something changing that is better for the kids and better for the teachers. So we're going to continue to do that throughout the week. If you have any other comments that you'd like to send me about the plan, please email me directly. Questions or edits or suggestions. There were a lot of good ones tonight. I took some notes, but I appreciate everybody's input, and we'll keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. Our next school committee meeting is August 11th. And if there's nothing further, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Whoop, second.
Okay, let's do our roll call. Pam Nurse Acton, yes.
Steve Ledoux Concord, yes.
Ford Spalding Dover, yes.
Jennifer Leonie Lancaster, yes.
Jeff Stuhlin, Needham, yes.
Judy Crocker, Lexington, yes.
Skipped over Judy, sorry. Judy.
Alice DeLuca, yes.
Michael Ruderman, Arlington, yes.
Okay. Well, thank you all, and we will see you next week. And we really appreciate everyone who has joined us for the meeting tonight.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you, Ed.